He only bumped the handlebar. No damage. No words. Just an old man in a faded camo jacket trying to pass by. But in a flash, the biker slapped him so hard he hit the gravel. Blood, groceries, and a photo of a woman in uniform scattered to the wind. No one helped. No one moved. Until a man stepped out of the shadows. Calm. Silent. Dangerous. What happened next turned a dusty parking lot into the setting for a national reckoning and a long-overdue tribute to a forgotten hero. If this story moved you, subscribe now and never miss a moment where honor stands up in silence. The heat clung to the pavement like sweat on skin, rising in lazy waves above the cracked asphalt of a nowhere town off Route 93. The diner had been there for years, the kind of place with sun-bleached Pepsi signs, a flickering open light, and a jukebox that hadn't played anything newer than 1987. Inside, the hum of a fan battled the weight of dead air and fried onions. Outside, the parking lot came to life with a chorus of revving engines and laughter roughened by liquor and leather. 5 bikes stood polished like chrome statues, hulking, gleaming, loud, their riders louder. Black vests, patches, mirrored sunglasses, too much swagger for too little reason. They leaned against their machines, tossing insults like quarters in a jukebox, each one louder than the last. No one noticed the old man at first. He stepped through the diner's door with a quiet slowness that came not from weakness, but from miles. Desert camo jacket sun-faded and frayed at the cuffs. Boots scuffed down to dull gray. A cane that looked like it had history etched into every scratch. He carried a small brown paper bag in one hand, folded neatly at the top. Dog food, probably. Maybe some bread. One corner of a photo peeked out a young woman in uniform smiling like the world still made sense. He wasn't in the way. He wasn't saying a word. Just passing. Too close, maybe. The hem of his jacket brushed the edge of a handlebar, making the motorcycle rock half an inch. No dent. No scratch. No harm. But it was enough. A biker turned tall, red bandana. A sneer too practiced to be real and saw only one thing. An old man too close to his machine. The insult wasn't in the contact. It was in the camouflage, in the age, in the lack of fear. A second passed. Then came the sound. One loud crack. The slap hit like a gunshot. The old man crumpled sideways, hard, his cane skittering across the gravel. Dust rose. Groceries scattered. The bag split, its contents rolling under a truck. He didn't cry out. He didn't fight back. He just stayed there for a moment, stunned, his hand still reaching for the photo that had fluttered loose onto the pavement. The lot fell silent. Nobody moved. One waitress peeked through the blinds, then stepped back. A couple by the ice machine kept sipping their drinks. Someone chuckled. No one intervened. And the man on the ground? He just started to rise, not with anger, not even with shame, but with that slow, familiar dignity only a veteran can carry after being knocked down in front of a world that stopped watching long ago. Miles Carter moved slowly, like someone who had learned not to rush pain. He pressed one hand to the pavement and pushed himself upright with a low grunt, gravel biting through the knee of his camo pants. The brown bag lay torn beside him, its contents spilled like a memory shattered on the ground. A dented can of peaches rolled against a curb. A box of dog food lay face down, leaking kibble into the dirt. And fluttering just beyond his reach, its corners curled and edges worn soft from years of folding, was a photograph. He reached for that first. The woman in the photo wore an army dress uniform, the kind they don't make anymore. Pressed, proud, beaming. Her smile was steady, like his once had been. She couldn't have been more than 25 in that picture. She was saluting. He didn't know if she still did. Behind him, one of the bikers laughed. Not a laugh meant for humor, one meant to land. Another chimed in, mocking the way he'd hit the ground. "Should have parked your walker, Gramps," someone muttered. Miles didn't respond. He wasn't surprised. That kind of noise didn't sting anymore. Not after what he'd seen. what he'd lost. Not after Fallujah. Not after Kandahar. Not after being forgotten by the very people he served for. He gathered the groceries one by one. No rush. No panic. The can. The photo. The bag of kibble, now dusted in road grit. He dusted it off with the same care he'd once used to clean a rifle after patrol. Precise. Gentle. Even now, he treated every object like it mattered more than the people watching. Inside the diner, a waitress peeked out from behind the blinds. She saw the blood on his face, the stoop in his shoulders, the smear of red on his sleeve as he wiped his lip. She looked for a second too long, then turned back around and pretended she hadn't seen a thing. Miles Carter was 82. Army mechanic. 3 tours. The kind of man who carried entire fire teams on his back without asking for credit. The kind of man who came home to a shrinking pension, a leaky roof, and silence from a VA line that never picked up. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. That emotion had burned out years ago. He just looked tired. The kind of tired that lives in the bones. The kind that comes from watching your country forget your name while still humming the anthem. He stood with effort, one hand gripping the edge of a rusted newspaper stand, the other clutching the torn bag. He wiped the blood away with the corner of his sleeve, folded the photograph back into his pocket, and exhaled slowly. No one helped, and no one stopped him when he limped toward the bench alone. The heat pressed down like a second skin, thick and humming, but in the narrow strip of shadow between 2 delivery trucks, the air felt still. It was the kind of stillness you don't notice until it's broken, until someone steps out of it. He'd been standing there for minutes, maybe longer, blended into the gap like he belonged there, not hiding, just waiting, observing, motionless, a man shaped by discipline, not drama. His back rested against one of the trucks, arms folded, ball cap pulled low over his brow, long sleeves, dark and plain, despite the heat that made others sweat through tank tops. One boot planted firm against the ground, the other crossed casually at the ankle, still as stone. But his eyes moved, locked on the old man in camo now slumped on the bench, locked on the way no one looked, the way laughter rang louder than conscience. His jaw tightened once, barely, not emotion calculation. A slow intake of breath. Then he moved. Just a step. His boot met pavement with a sound quieter than thought, but everything about his presence changed. His back straightened. Shoulders drew square. One hand shifted inside the sleeve, brushing against a faded fabric patch stitched onto the inner wrist. His posture wasn't angry. It was ready. Nobody noticed. Not yet. The bikers kept talking, their backs to him, their noise filling the space like smoke. The customers at the pump kept fueling up. The manager inside still pretended to be busy at the register, eyes never straying toward the windows. But someone did notice. Through the glass of the diner, the same waitress who'd turned away now turned back. Her eyes scanned the lot again, almost out of guilt. Then she saw him. Her brows drew tight. She took a half step toward the window, hand pressing against the glass, face paling slightly. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He simply kept walking, one step at a time, toward the man on the bench and the ones who had left him there. She whispered the name like a prayer no one had said in years. Kane. The surf at Coronado slapped hard against the shins of the young men gasping for breath in the sand. Salt crusting in the corners of their eyes, muscles screaming, minds unraveling. Chief Petty Officer Ellis Kane stood knee-deep in the Pacific, arms crossed, voice cutting like cold steel. Get up. You don't stop until I tell you you're done. Pain is the price of entry. A candidate collapsed again. Kane didn't flinch, just stared down, unblinking. You came here to prove something. Don't let it be that you quit. Even the ocean seemed quieter around him. The memory flickered like an old film reel, then faded, drowned out by the hiss of summer heat and the crunch of gravel underfoot. Present-day Kane stepped into sunlight, the shadow peeling off his back like a second skin. His movement wasn't rushed. Every step deliberate, measured, not a man charging in. A man arriving right on time. Ahead, Miles Carter leaned awkwardly against the bench, reaching for something beneath a delivery truck. His cane had rolled there when the slap sent him flying, the same cane he'd carved himself after knee surgery at a VA that forgot his name 5 times in the same year. He bent low, fingers straining. Before he could grab it, a different hand reached and gloved. Steady. Sure. The cane was lifted cleanly from the dirt, the movement so smooth it felt rehearsed. Kane knelt beside him, boots planted, eyes level. He didn't offer a smile, didn't ask for thanks, just extended the cane across the gap between them like it was a baton in a relay that neither man had ever asked to run. Miles looked up, squinted past the cap, past the lines carved into Kane's face by years and hard sun. He blinked once. Recognition didn't come from memory. It came from presence. "You all right, Sergeant?" Kane asked. Not loud, just enough to part the thick air between them. Miles didn't answer at first. He just nodded, small, stiff, proud. The cane slid into his grip like it had never left. The gravel shifted beneath boots that had never seen sandbags or blood. The lead biker swaggered forward, lips curled in a sneer that came from too many bar fights and not enough consequence. His sunglasses mirrored the hot pavement, hiding eyes that had only learned to stare down people smaller than him. He stopped a few feet from Kane, arms spread like he just landed the punchline at a poker table. "You his son or something?" The biker grinned, tilting his head toward Miles, who sat steady now, hand tight around the cane, eyes unreadable. Kane didn't answer right away. He stood slow, each vertebra aligning like gears locking into place. His chin rose. His arms hung loose at his sides, not tense, not clenched, just ready. His voice came low, steady, without even a hint of heat. "You ever hit another veteran again?" Kane said. "You'd better make sure he stays down." There was no threat in his voice. There was only certainty. The biker scoffed, forced a laugh out of the pit of his chest, looking over his shoulder at the others. A few chuckled nervously, unsure why their hands had suddenly gone clammy. One of them muttered something under his breath, then shut up when Kane turned just slightly and rolled up the cuff of his sleeve. On the inside of his forearm, faded but clear, ink etched by fire and history, a Navy SEAL trident, sharp over a black dagger coiled in silent promise. The laughter stopped. The air got thinner. The waitress behind the diner door pushed it open with trembling fingers. She stepped halfway out, mouth falling open as the truth caught up with her memory. "Oh my God," she whispered, to no one and everyone. "That's him." Kane didn't move. He didn't need to. Because in that second, the biker realized he hadn't just slapped an old man. He'd awakened something much older, and much harder to walk away from. It didn't take long. Fear travels faster than sound. The swagger drained from the lead biker's face, his cocky grin folding into something more brittle, less certain. Behind him, one of the younger guy's jeans too clean, patch too new took a slow step back, like maybe distance would undo what had just happened. He squinted at the ink on Kane's arm, then at the man himself. The hat, the posture, the silence that didn't shrink but filled. "Dude," he muttered, breath catching in his throat. "That's Kane, from Firebase Raptor." The name hit like a dropped wrench in a quiet garage. A trucker leaning against his cab looked up, jaw stiff. He'd heard that name once. Afghanistan, 2006. Rescue op gone wrong. Only one man walked out with 5 wounded slung over his shoulders, said nothing to the press, vanished after the dust settled. Someone near the gas pump slowly lowered their coffee and pulled out their phone, screen already glowing. The camera caught the moment when tension, unspoken until now, gripped the lot like a storm cloud pressed low to the earth. Kane didn't flinch. He didn't look at the phones. He turned instead to the people, the ones who'd watched a man get slapped and bleed and fall without lifting a hand. His eyes swept over them, steady, cold, measured. "Which one of you watched?" he asked, voice even, almost quiet. And did nothing? No one answered. A couple that had laughed before looked down into their fries. The woman who had peeked through the blinds pretended to refill a napkin holder. The door jingled faintly behind her, but she never stepped outside. Even the manager-thick forearms, thinning hair, fake military cap hanging behind the registers stood frozen behind the glass, arms folded across a gut that had never seen basic training. His lips pressed together like silence could erase him. Kane's gaze moved past him without pause, like he wasn't even worth the disappointment. No one defended themselves. Not a single voice said, "I didn't see," because they had. They all had, and now they were seen in return. Kane reached down without a word, one hand under Miles's arm, the other steady at his back. The old man rose slowly, breath shallow, knees stiff, pride heavier than pain. Together, they moved to the bench. No rush, no drama. Just one man helping another find his footing again, in a world that had stopped noticing when veterans bled. Miles sat with a soft exhale, hand resting on his cane, jaw tight. He didn't thank Kane. He didn't have to. Kane turned. The biker hadn't moved far, still trying to wear his arrogance like armor, though the edges were cracking. His friends had gone quiet, shifting in place like boys caught in a lie. Their leader stood alone now, suddenly unsure of where the line was, and which side of it he belonged on. Kane stared at him, eyes flat as stone. Apologize. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut sharper for how calmly it landed. The biker sneered, tried to puff his chest. For what? He bumped my ride, man. Kane didn't reply. He just stepped forward. One footfall. Measured. Precise. That's all it took. The biker's throat clicked. He backed up half a step, smirk slipping sideways. I didn't mean look. It was just... Kane reached into his pocket, pulled out a battered phone, scratched and faded from years in the field. His thumb moved with the certainty of someone who never forgot a code under fire. He tapped a single contact. Held the phone to his mouth. Echo base. Send unit. Immediate. He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then he folded his arms and waited. The biker blinked, confused. Unit? What are you even talking about? No one answered. The question wasn't for him. 10 minutes passed. Then the wind changed. A low hum came first, not sirens, not tires screeching, just the quiet purr of engines built for silence and control. 2 matte black SUVs rolled into the lot, gliding like ghosts. No markings. No urgency, just purpose. Cold, official. Doors opened in unison. And everything in the parking lot shifted again from tension to reckoning. The SUVs idled low, the engines barely audible under the hum of heat coming off the asphalt. Doors opened without rush, without flash. No lights, no sirens. Just boots on the pavement, clean and polished, stepping with a gravity that turned the whole parking lot quiet. First came 2 military police comm, unreadable, in desert tan uniforms without name tapes. Then a local sheriff, sunburned neck visible beneath his collar, eyes already darting toward the diner like he wanted to be anywhere else. Last, an Army liaison officer in pressed fatigues, clipboard in hand, face blank as concrete. They walked straight to Kane. He didn't move, didn't explain, just nodded once, low and deliberate, and pointed toward Miles. That was all they needed. The liaison peeled off first, crouched beside the bench. Miles looked up, offered a soft nod. No dramatics. Just the truth passed from one man who had worn the uniform to another who still did. A quiet word was exchanged. Then the liaison stood and returned to the others. The sheriff glanced around the lot, swallowing hard. His jaw worked for a moment, like he wanted to say something. Maybe apologize, maybe excuse. But all he managed was a muttered curse under his breath as he took off his hat and rubbed the back of his neck. He looked like a man who realized he'd shown up late to a test he was never qualified to take. The biker didn't speak. He didn't bolt, didn't argue, just stood there, shoulders half raised like he still hadn't decided if this was a prank or a warning. But when one of the MPs took a step closer and raised a single hand, not to cuff, not to strike, just to get, he flinched and followed. No fight, no sound, no more smirks. Because he wasn't afraid of arrest. He was afraid of what he'd almost touched and didn't understand. Within the hour, the first video hit social media. Shaky phone footage, wind noise, and a single frozen caption burned into the screen. He slapped an old man. Then this happened. No music, no filter, just truth, and the kind of silence that says everything. By Monday morning, the video had been watched over 2 million times, a grainy clip of a quiet man rising from the dirt and the storm that followed. No edits, no voiceover, just raw moments strung together like a truth the country had been aching to remember. The name came next: Miles Carter, and with it, the record. Sergeant, 100 and honest, airborne, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Operation Steel Rain. He'd been airdropped into jungle fire at 23 and had carried 3 men on his back through mortar fire before a helicopter finally pulled them all out. Bronze Star, Combat Infantryman Badge. A chest full of citations that never got framed, just folded away in a box under his bed beside a dog-eared letter and a photo of a young woman in uniform. He'd never talked about any of it. Local news anchors fumbled to pronounce battalion names. National reporters dug up records, tried to interview him. VA reps left voicemails they should have made years earlier. All while Miles Carter sat in the same creaky chair in the corner of his trailer, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug and feeding his mutt half a scrambled egg. He didn't want a parade, didn't need speeches, just wanted to walk to the store without being reminded how invisible he'd become. When the town mayor called with an invitation to a ceremony at the park, he said no. When the American Legion offered a plaque, he said no. But when Kane stopped by the trailer, leaned against the railing, arms crossed like old friends do, he just said, "Do it for the ones who didn't make it back." Miles didn't answer. He just nodded. That Sunday, they came. Not for spectacle. There were no marching bands, no fireworks, no color guard. Just people. Quiet people. A father lifting his son onto his shoulders. A nurse from the clinic where Miles once waited 6 hours for a flu shot. A class of 4th graders holding hand-drawn signs that read, "Thank you, Mr. Carter." And in the middle of it all, Miles sat in a borrowed chair under a plain canvas awning, the sun soft on his face. No medals pinned, no words needed. Just finally seen. The wind had changed by Thursday. Lighter, less bitter, like the town itself had let out a long breath it didn't know it had been holding. A new coat of paint was drying on the diner's doorframe. Someone had patched the sidewalk where the groceries had spilled. No plaque, no sign, just small repairs in quiet acknowledgement of something that had finally cracked through the surface. Kane pulled up just before noon. Same truck, same silence. He parked at the edge of the lot and stepped out slowly, boots landing with purpose but no urgency. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't need to be. The diner was nearly empty inside. Locals still gave him a wide berth, not out of fear but a kind of reverence they couldn't quite name. The waitress nodded without a word and motioned to the corner booth. He didn't have to ask who was already there. Miles sat facing the window, sunlight warming his weathered face, steam curling from the rim of a white ceramic mug between his hands. Same jacket, same slow breath. But something in the way he held himself had changed. Not taller, just lighter. He looked up as Kane approached and gave a small nod. "You didn't have to step in," Miles said, voice low, words shaped by something heavier than modesty. Kane sat across from him, folding his hands on the table like he was settling in for a mission debrief. "Neither did you," he said, "back in Nam. But you did." He paused, meeting Miles's eyes. "And I remember." They didn't hug. There was no teary farewell. Just the quiet weight of 2 men who had carried the same burdens in different wars, across different years, and now shared a moment where nothing needed to be said anymore. Kane stood after a while. He reached out, laid a firm hand on Miles's shoulder, and nodded once, the kind of nod that only happens between those who faced fire, and kept walking. He turned and walked out into the sunlight. Outside, near the parking lot's edge, a boy no older than 10 stood beside a bicycle, cap crooked on his head. He raised a shaky hand to his brow, uncertain but sincere. Miles saw him through the window, and with deliberate grace, he raised his own hand in return, crisp, slow, proud.